I'm very nervous, so I'm not going to stand behind the podium. I'm going to walk around to like calm my nerves during this, so apologize for all the movement up here. But yeah, so first I want to obviously thank the foundation for putting on this event. I know these things are extremely difficult to do. And also giving me the platform to have this talk. I'm sure they saw the slides beforehand and might not be in agreement with everyone here today, so I appreciate that. And I also want to thank the Electric Coin Company for the opportunity to contribute to Zcash, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here today. So thanks to everyone involved in that. The title of my talk is Zcash Has No Morals, and my argument today is that making any type of pseudo-political argument around adopting privacy technologies is not things that we should be currently focusing on, because one, I don't think they work, and two, I think we have better things that we could do to help drive adoption. My name's Sagstetter. I'm the community and marketing lead at Espresso Systems, and I've also contributed to Zcash via the Electric Coin Company. I'm currently finishing up a minor grant with the Zcash Foundation, and I created an open source project called ZecHub, which is now being managed by an amazing community of dozens of people. So I think for like the next 5 to 6 minutes, I definitely want to set some context around the talk, right? Because I'm going to be spouting off these ideas, and people will be like, okay, where are we going with this? I've seen this guy's Twitter account before. So I want to ask our Lord Satoshi for forgiveness, because I have LARPed. I have a lot of the time used these arguments around we're making the world a better place, and if people adopt our technology, only good things will come of it. And I think getting into these situations, it's very easy to say those things, because they give a lot of likes on social media, and they're easy to repeat, and they're easy to share, and it feels really good. But we stay inside of our bubble, and how much change are we actually making when we make these statements? So as someone who has done that frequently, I want to apologize. And I also want to say some things that we agree on. I think privacy is a human right. I would extend that to anonymous speech, anonymous payments, and anonymous assembly. I think Zcash is amazing as a technology and a money, and I think that everyone who has built on it and is currently built on it who has built on it in the past is amazing. And I think everyone in this room believes that censorship-resistant money that protects user privacy is a good thing. And I want to put a big emphasis on the word believes, because if we all believe something and we have consensus around that, that's great, but that doesn't necessarily make it true in the world. There's a lot of people in a lot of groups that believe a lot of crazy shit, and doesn't mean they're right. So why are some of us here? As Joshua Dial, who is Joe Exotic's campaign manager, if you're not familiar with Joe Exotic, he was the Tiger King, and he ran for US president, so eloquently put it, I'm a libertarian, so technically fuck the feds, right? So when we're constructing these systems, Zcash, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc., they're extremely anarchic systems, where we're not trying to create new asset classes, we're trying to replace fiat. We're trying to get new alternatives and new options to fiat currencies. So that's a very anarchic ideal, and that's why I think some of us are here. And you don't have to be a libertarian to have anarchic tendencies. And that is only one of the reasons. Whether you're an anarchist or anarcho-capitalist on that kind of political spectrum, that might be a reason you're here. You might be here solely for the math and the cryptography behind Zcash, because it's very interesting, and you want to find out ways you can advance the cryptography outside of the Zcash-specific application. You might be an investor, and you might have bought money with Zcash, and you were hoping that that asset would increase relative to the fiat currency you denominate your savings in. You might have read Facebook's privacy policy and went, that's pretty scary, so what if I learned about better ways to protect myself online, and you got here. Or you're just happy to be here, and you're contributing. You don't really know why you're in this room right now, but you're amazing, and you're happy, and we appreciate that as well. You can be any of these things, you can be any combination of them, you can be all of them, or you can be none of them. But these are some of the ideals that I thought about when we're building this system. And as you can see within this, like, the people who only care about price, and like the anarchist libertarian types, and then maybe the people who only care about cryptography, have very different motives for participating in this ecosystem. So why are we here today? What can we do today instead of kind of presenting these moral arguments around privacy? Zcash currently is digital cash. It's something that we can spend and we can save. Right now, it's not a platform in which governments will build financial systems to protect user privacy. One, because we're building on these technologies, but they currently don't exist. And then two, I don't think the government actually cares about your privacy, so I don't foresee a future of that happening. But we have a system today where it's digital cash, it protects user privacy, it can be very effective for a number of different things. So getting into the meat of this talk, some things that we disagree on. Zcash is on a positive trend, irrelevant of market conditions. I was at an Ethereum conference or Ethereum-aligned conference last week in Paris, and there was a lot of energy around the infrastructure that's being built within the Ethereum ecosystem. And even though the price is not at the top where people were buying at like $4,700 an ETH, but people are really excited about all the things that are getting built irrespective of price. I don't know if we can say that about Zcash. I don't know if we can say that Zcash community members have a voice. I don't know if the angry forum troll, if all of them like got together and tried to create like a little rebellion, I don't know how effective that would be. And I don't know how effective it would be if things like ZCAP wanted to go against the Zcash Foundation, kind of in practice and in theory as well, because a lot of the community governance and community signaling we have is non-binding. So we need to determine how much voice community members have. And the last thing that we might disagree on is that Zcash is a morally good thing for the world. So let's look at some other examples of technology. Twitter, or this thing that used to be called Twitter, it was killed by some dictator who has $1 billion, and it's been very unfortunate because that's where I spent all my time, and now I'm really sad. But who's had a good experience on Twitter? Like one good experience at all, right? And who's had a bad experience? Twitter is like this technology that is a great supplier of information, but it's also a great supplier of misinformation. It's a great way to spread memes and have like a little party with your friends online, but it's also a great platform to spread really targeted online abuse. It's all about your experience in the implementation of the platform and how it's used. Granted, there's a private company now and they're completely fucking it up, but they have like their own motives and agenda. But like generally, it's pretty widely accessible. And yeah, you can have kind of any experience you want. You can go to like anti-vaccine Twitter, or you can go to like into the depths of like crypto Twitter, or into the depths of just like medical research, right? It's just widely used for a number of different things. So again, it just depends on the implementation. Another thing is this thing called Monero, and it's this cryptocurrency kind of similar to Zcash in some ways. And again, it's just a technology. It's pretty permissionless. And I hear a lot of people say that they have a lot of users, right? And I hear people in the Zcash community sometimes say, well, we don't want those types of users. We don't want the users that Monero has. And again, if we're constructing easily accessible permissionless protocols, even though we have some type of social consensus of those are the users we might not want as a community, who are we really to say that they can't use and access the platform? I don't think we actually have that right. And additionally with Monero, if you look at like the Monero conference that just happened in Prague, if you saw it on Twitter, they were all like at this cool hacker house in Prague and just like spending Monero, and they spike transactions up like really high. Every time there's a Monero conference, the transactions like go through the roof because they're all engaging with each other and having like a little peer-to-peer economy with it. So that's a really cool idea. And you can also do things like 3 weeks ago, I donated some Monero to a soccer club in Argentina who's using it to fund their jerseys and some of their operations. So again, it just depends on the use case that you actually use the platform for. So let's look at things we can get with Zcash today. You might have to do some gymnastics for a couple of these things, but let's break these down from a moral perspective. Coffee. Who drinks coffee? Who loves coffee? Best thing ever, right? I drink a ton of coffee, but what if I told you there's an entire religious group where drinking coffee is against their moral code of conduct? And if you drink coffee and you're honest about it with your church leadership, that you might be restricted from participating in some religious activities. So if you are in Lehi, Utah, driving down the street, and you got Zcash loaded up in your Flexa app, and you go to Dunkin' Donuts, buy a cup of coffee with it, and you take that back to your house where your whole family is a part of this religion, you might get some sour looks. That is an immoral act in the eyes of some people within that group. If you want to like ask me how I know that, feel free after the talk. Porn. Who thinks porn's a good thing? Cool. I'll put my hand up. Under the right circumstances, right? Porn can be this thing where it leads to sexual exploitation, sexual abuse, it leads to addiction. It can just lead to it has a lot of bad consequences at times. But it can also be a thing, because there's a market that exists, it's a way for individuals to create revenue streams that they might not be able to otherwise, to earn money for themselves and their family. And now with the kind of the systems that we have set up online, you can even do that from the comfort of your own home, within the safety of your own home. So again, is it good or bad? Just depends. And then the last one I won't dive into is guns. Like, are guns items to form militias? Guns are a good thing? Yeah, like, again, that's the more, I'd say, kind of like the tougher one there, but are they items to like form militias against the state and defend yourself, or are they things we should not have in modern civil societies? And more. And as we expand the usage and the accessibility of Zcash, we just get into tons of these arguments. Remember, Zcash is digital cash. We're using it to buy things and sell things. So we really lack, in my opinion, with these moral arguments, kind of like a strong stance of saying this is good for the world, because what if Zcash is used something that we as a social group say is not good for the world? But what if being morally good or having like some moral justification or some, some reason to build on this, like it's driving you every single day? What is that? What if we all think that's our driver, right? Let's just Trojan horse it. Because we have society, we have borderless internet money in this Trojan horse, and then after everyone gets the borderless internet money and we like flip it for shitcoins and we're having a great time making money and having a party, like then we all come out of our little thing and dose like a bunch of crypto anarchy on them. There's a way that we can present this information to society that doesn't make it like, if you don't use this thing, society falls. If we don't use this thing, the surveillance state is going to take over completely, because people don't want to be coerced by fear into adopting these technologies. They want to, also have a good time. So when we have these arguments of like moral superiority, we kind of get into this weird state where we as a community, in a probably more siloed group of developers and community builders, are in control of the narrative around Zcash. And we're putting out narratives to the world of why people should adopt it. Privacy is obviously something that we all think is good, but when we expound that to everybody, we're selling a message and selling a story. So in the current state of Zcash onboarding, what I like to call broke Zcash onboarding, you hear about it, like Twitter, Coinbase ad, friend. Then you think like, oh, it's a private version of Bitcoin, it could be a good thing one day, so you buy it, and then you hold it. We have a word for this. It's called ZODL. And I'm on a campaign this weekend to exterminate that term from our vocabulary for the rest of eternity. Because when we're only holding Zcash, we're viewing it as an investment. We're viewing it as something that goes up in US dollars from the previous price that we bought it at. And we're incentivized not to use it. Don't use Zcash right now, because if you use it at $20 or $25 or $30 a coin, oh, what about when it's $15,000? You're really gonna hate buying that pizza. You're really gonna hate yourself for doing that. But that's not how we construct this thing. That's not why we get this thing off the ground, and that's not how we drive actual adoption. Because what we could have is we could have woke Zcash onboarding. And this is kind of playing out in some smaller communities now. If you look at ZecHub, Zcash Brazil, Zcash Espanol, and then also Free to Z. You have people who, for whatever reason, want to earn the money. I don't know if privacy is always the main driver. I think maybe there's an opportunity to earn it. So they offer their goods and services for Zcash. So they earn it, and then after they earn it, because they've been paid in Zcash, they're not purchasing it with fiat money from their bank account. They view it as a token with utility and not investment. So they're now incentivized to start using it within their local communities. And we see those models if you follow the Zcash communities closely on social media. You have people now getting the coin and then trying to redistribute that coin into their local communities as much as possible, because there's utility behind it. And then they repeat, and they do this over and over again, well within reason. And if we have this model and then are able to also interoperate with a number of different cryptocurrency ecosystems, if you like bridging and stuff like that, other communities will be incentivized to come in and participate in the Zcash ecosystem. And then they'll be able to have the choice to hold it, use it, or swap out of it. But we're giving them an opportunity to be a Zcash user versus having someone come in and say, hey, buy it on this centralized platform. A quick point about broke Zcash onboarding, the current state, by the way, is we have to go onto these centralized exchanges and take a selfie with our passport and upload that into some centralized database where a junior level engineer can sell it on the black market. And so in that kind of state, we're having people buy it, sometimes hold it on those platforms, and those platforms could potentially go bust. And that's not also protecting user privacy. So I wanted to make that point really quickly. But in this other state, we're creating models that are more permissionless to interact with the ecosystem. It's not two US domiciled entities and a small group of miners who are receiving all the block reward. We're decentralizing as much as possible to a community of people. Because we have two worlds right now. You have people who bought Zcash, and trust me, if you're on the Zcash forums, you have seen these people, and they are upset. Especially if you bought, like when Barry Silbert was like tweeting about it at $300, oh God, you're pissed. But like, you bought Zcash, and it's a tough world. It's really hard to see the future because the price is so down, and your holdings are not as worth as much. And the reason you view that is because that was the incentivization model that you participated in. You heard about it, you were convinced it was good, you bought it, price is down, you're upset. But we have this other model. Who's been in the Zcash global Discord? They're having a great time. Like, they're having a party in there. And yeah, it's maybe a little janky, and it's not like the cleanest UX, and it doesn't look like the most official thing in the world, but you have like small little pockets and communities of people that are contributing to the protocol and providing value, and then in exchange for that value, they're receiving a currency that's borderless, permissionless. So in this model, we have obviously people who are enjoying themselves a lot more today. So where I want to spend the meat of the talk today is focusing on this idea of less mission alignment and more accessibility. So the first point, create more opportunities for people to participate in the Zcash economy. There's things that we can do today with Zcash's digital cash to create this model. If we look at things like the Miner Grants Program, ZecHub's Bounty Program, the Global Ambassadors, we have people receiving, well, relatively small amounts of Zcash compared to like the more major grants. But they're taking this and they're decentralizing the workload. They're creating more opportunities for people to come in and earn Zcash directly from the block reward. And they're creating a model where people view that token with utility, et cetera, and start using it. So the thing that we can do right now in these discussions that we're going to have this weekend is like, how can we decentralize the dev fund as reasonably as possible to create more earning opportunities for people within the ecosystem to contribute, participate, earn Zcash, and have a different incentive model instead of just buying it on Coinbase? That is the first thing that we can do right now with Zcash's digital cash. We don't have to wait for technological upgrades. We don't have to wait for new research on if we're going to move from proof of work to proof of stake. We don't have to wait for these year-long proposals and year-long implementations to play out. This is something we can do today to create a more incentive-aligned community that's around contribution and building the protocol versus this idea of just purchasing it through a third-party provider. The other point, which I don't know anything about, and I'm not going to stand up here and act like I do, but I hear it a lot, is that we need to enable builders to have an easier time for creating products for their own local communities. Because remember, we're a small group of people, 2 US domiciled organizations, and obviously ZCG does a great job of like redistributing block rewards as much as possible. But when I'm tweeting from my apartment in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I used to live, about how Zcash is going to save the world, I don't know how it's actually going to do that. I'm just tweeting something because it's easy to say, it aligns with the mission theoretically, and it's good for likes. But what if we had a more permissive protocol that enabled people to come in and build applications for the use cases that matter to them? And instead of us as a community trying to make those decisions and we're just kind of throwing darts in the air. So for example, if you need to create a privacy stack for people who need to solicit and pay for abortions in states where those are legal, how can we make Zcash the currency that drives that economy? And remember, no morals, right? On the other side of this pseudo-political aisle, what if we need to create a similar stack for someone trying to sell Bibles on a black market where Christianity is illegal? Remember, no morals. Whether these things are good or bad or indifferent to us, we just need to enable the access and enable the product so people can build these things for the people that need them. So people who need privacy can get it, and we're doing it in a way that we as a community are just letting the cards fall where they may. So what we're doing now, instead of marketing campaigns and all these different ideas, we're driving adoption through accessibility and utility and not pseudo-political, trust me arguments. Josh Swihart from the ECC had a forum post where he mentioned like the price of Zcash versus Bitcoin is a good indicator for how much it's being used, and that a lot of Zcash is moving to the shielded pool, but we're not seeing like an uptick in transactions, for example. If we have this model of really focusing on utility and usage and accessibility, independent of the use case and independent of how we feel about it, we're also going to drive more value to the network, which increases the price, which financially incentivizes miners or stakers to secure the network, and we have a more sustainable future. So we can't say the price here doesn't matter, because remember, we're talking about the incentive model where people bought it and they're upset, and that's not the one we want, but we also can't say to them that the price doesn't matter, that the price is the least interesting thing about this technology. Because if there's no price, if the price is zero, this doesn't happen, the network isn't secure, and I lose my grant, like a lot of people lose their jobs, and we don't get to fund the things that we think are really important. So now we're creating this like feedback loop where people are getting into the network, they're actively using it, they're actively participating, they're actively contributing in driving more value. That value is accrued in network price, more secure network, and then we can fund more things that we think are really freaking cool. So just because we're saying that we should step away from incentivizing people to use centralized exchanges or do KYC, whatever, we're not telling them that the price doesn't matter. That's a very key, important point that I want to get across. Because we currently have two paths. One path is, it's dark, it's cold, it's rainy, it's really hard, near impossible mission to accomplish. And it's you're kind of alone. Because it's among a centralized group of people who are making the decisions, who are receiving the majority of the block reward, who have the ability to decide who gets to participate or not, based on various models. But it's alone. And we end up getting into this circle of like having to depend on political arguments to keep us motivated because it's really hard to build. Or you could have this other model and this other path where it's dark, cold, lonely. I mean, not lonely, dark, cold, nearly impossible mission. But you're a part of a decentralized community that has different values, different use cases, and different implementations of the Zcash protocol. But as we're driving more usage, that attracts more people, again, the feedback loop. And as there's more people, more of those groups start to appear. So you're able to find your group within this larger community. So if you care about ensuring that everyone has access to safely and securely pay for abortions, if you decentralize the community and the protocol, even for use cases that you don't agree with, more people who believe in that same type of thing will be able to come in and participate and be able to build with us. And that model is a lot more fun. I would argue that it's more productive, it's more sustainable. And yeah, it's still a nearly impossible mission, but we're all gonna die anyways because the AI is gonna kill us, so let's have fun while it lasts, right? And that's my argument for today. Decentralize the dev fund, make it easy for people to participate, so thank you.
Great, well, thank you so much. That was an excellent talk. So I'm going to start with a question, and then we have questions also from different people. So I'll ask a quick question, and then we'll kind of go into these different questions. But I guess, yeah, so one thing I think that's useful to think about is there's an overhead to, there's a technical overhead to participating in hard technical standards like Zcash. And if you're an abortion provider, your job is to serve people who need abortions. You don't necessarily have that kind of technical understanding. So I'm curious, in your sort of proposal to involve more of the community, how do you balance and make it easy for people to participate, but also be able to do their core competency and not have to level up in that kind of way?
That's a great question. So with regards to the technical side, I think it's about, and this is obviously not on the technical side, so take this answer with a grain of salt, but it's creating like more like developer kits and allowing people to take this stack and like easily implement it into their own, right? So if you're someone who needs to create this platform to fund payments on some black or gray market, how can you just simply go into some documentation that's listed of like how you can implement Zcash as the payment service that like powers that, right? I'm thinking like, you know, like a plug, like for example, if you're doing like an e-commerce store, how can you like create a plugin for Zcash Online, something similar to that, right? With regards to the non-technical side, what we've kind of seen in some of the community models is that if you even lower the barrier to entry, that I was actually very pleasantly surprised of the quality of contributors that came into the groups. So we tried to make it to where like all you had to do is write a newsletter or do translations, but we end up getting people submitting these awesome proposals to like one up on like design and one up on like different social media like properties with regards to like video and editing, etc. So I think on the non-technical side, but by just giving people a space and an opportunity to come in, it's more accessible and more welcoming, and easier to kind of find your lane. People, I think, who want to contribute usually have something valuable to add. So I would say that most examples we've seen, just people come in and build really cool stuff. There's not been a lot of hand-holding on the non-technical side, especially.
Cool. That's a really great answer. Yeah, so I guess another question that was asked was, yeah, just kind of considering a situation where, so we say Zcash has no morals, you might be able, and this is true for a lot of technology, you could use it for good or you could use it for bad, and that's something I think we as a community are pretty, well aware of. But, for example, like in the setting where Zcash could be used for things like money laundering, and what if the government asks Zcash to sort of like open up and like consider that in the future? How do we grapple with scenarios like that?
So I think, and I'm not going to credit myself for this idea, this is all Amber Balde, if you're familiar with her, she's awesome. I think most people are good. So I think if you make the protocol, if there's like an incentive model that attracts people to the protocol, for example, opportunities to earn Zcash, like we see a lot of people from various parts of the world do that. And when they get the money and they're able to build things on their own, like they're just going to build like useful things and good things. And hopefully if you make the protocol accessible, the good outweighs the bad. The other side of that is it depends on like what government are we adhering to. That's kind of like my issue with a lot of like the compliance protocols around privacy. It's like, are we listening to the US government and their sanctions list, or are we going to listen to the North Korean government and their sanctions list? Like, what's the standard? And which centralized entity is to say what like is illegal or legal, right? Because like, for example, in Afghanistan, girls can't even like go to university. Right. So like, it's, for me, by just creating a permissionless protocol, the theory is like people will build more good things than bad. I think you kind of saw that with like maybe Bitcoin's trajectory, is like it was drug money in the beginning, and then now it's kind of a meme with the HODL stuff, but like people are building really useful applications for kind of worthwhile causes in the eyes of a lot of the world. I would just see like a similar trend, potentially. Yeah.
So make the community bigger, and then we have more good things to argue
Yeah,
about.
because I think most people are good. I don't think most people have a more like bad agendas, for example.
Yeah. All right. So now we have another question about, so kind of along that similar line, what is your thoughts about religious institutions around the world potentially opening up to Zcash because they might require financial privacy? Is that something you've seen or you think might happen?
I've never seen it. I think that, again, that's one of the examples I brought up, like buying Bibles on the black market is a great use case for cryptocurrencies, potentially, right? Potentially. So like, yeah, like creating models where people could implement that as a part of their stack and they can use that to transact. Yeah, it would be a great use case. I just haven't seen it. So I'd be interested in that being implemented. Yeah.
How do we open up our community to start welcoming these people in, making it not so hypothetical?
So the first thing I would do is look at models. I think Zcash Brazil is a great example. I don't know if he wants me to share this, but I'm going to, so don't shoot me, Michael. Cool. Michael was a global ambassador and had his own stipend, which is, a relatively not what we would live on full time in the US. And he even distributed that to a group of 6 people. And as a community, because they distributed it and it had more than one person building, they were able to build a community that was so effective that it justified receiving more money than an ambassador stipend. So I would look at those types of models of what things are we doing in Zcash right now that are kind of inefficient and maybe not as effective, and like, okay, let's try something new. What if we took that money and reinvested it into community programs that are onboarding more contributors, onboarding new ideas, and making it easier to contribute and obviously earn Zcash directly from the block reward. So I would look at those types of models.
Okay. So it sounds like we have some like good things already, but we need to build on it.
Yeah, I think because that's the whole idea, right? This is like, obviously, I'm saying change a lot, but these models already exist. They exist in the form of a lot of the global ambassadors. They exist in the form of ZecHub. They exist in the form of the Zcash Foundation Minor Grants Program. Like, we need more of that, and let's really invest in those models and make it, attract more people and get more people into the ecosystem.
Cool. All right. Well, we're out of time. Thanks, Ian. And yeah, thanks so
everyone.
much.